Hi, this is Thomas Leonard Ross, KC, and I said on previous podcasts that I would be covering criminal justice stories relevant to Scotland. And the big story this week has clearly been the fact that after 122 days of evidence, the Sheku Bayoh Inquiry has lost its chairman, following upon the resignation of Lord Bracadale. So I thought that it might be of use. It's quite a complicated story, just to give a background in relation to it and what has happened previously and where we are with it. I suspect most people will know that Sheku Bayoh was aged 31 at the time of his death. He had a partner and two young sons. His origin was Sierra Leone. He was restrained in Hayfield Road, Kirkcaldy in Fife at around 20 past 7 in the morning on the 3rd of May 2015. And it appears to be established that in the hours before his death, he had taken illegal drugs. He'd been involved in a fight with a friend, and there were reports that he had armed himself with a knife. So the position is that a variety of calls were made to the emergency services, and on the police account they received continuous messages as they went to the scene of a black male armed with a knife chasing members of the public. They attended, they saw Sheku, certain verbal commands directed towards him, which he said he didn't comply with. The Pava spray was deployed. It appears to have no effect upon him. A female police officer eventually removed her baton and issued certain verbal commands. And he came towards her. She swiped her baton, missed him, and then realised she was in trouble and went to run, whereupon he punched her on the back of the head, knocking her to the ground. And it was alleged that he then proceeded to stamp on the female police officer 3 times. And in the subsequent post-mortem, the toxicology detected MDMA, alpha PVP, which I'd never heard of before, apparently a synthetic stimulant similar to methamphetamine, and THC, which is the constituent element of cannabis that causes the effects. So he was restrained by police officers. Appears that he was shackled and restrained face down, which is thought to be a dangerous way to conduct a restraint, and ultimately he expired. And of course the death was investigated by the Police Investigations and Review Commissioner, who carried out inquiries and reported the matter to the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, which is the Scottish equivalent of the DPP. But ultimately, on the 3rd of October 2018, a decision not to prosecute was communicated to the victim's family. They triggered their right to review, but ultimately the decision not to prosecute was confirmed on review in 2019. Now, given the circumstances, a fatal accident inquiry would have been required under the Inquiries into Fatal Accidents and Sudden Death Scotland Act 2016. But in this case, the normal FAI was widened out, and on the 12th of November 2019, the Justice Minister, Humza Yousaf, announced that there would be, he announced in the Scottish Parliament that there would be an inquiry, and that announcement was made on the 21st of May 2020, and the inquiry began hearing evidence in May 2022. It was announced that the inquiry would be chaired by Lord Bracadale, who's become absolutely key to events of this week, following upon his resignation. It's important to say that he is an individual who is held in the highest regard by everybody in the Scottish legal profession, and whatever you make of the decision to meet the families which were at the centre of the dispute, nobody doubts that he did it with the best of intentions. But in any event, Lord Bracadale, as we know him, Alistair Campbell, was called to the Scottish Bar in 1985. He'd previously worked as a Procurator Fiscal in Glasgow, went to the bar in 1985, prosecuted in the High Court from 1990 to 1993. It became Queen's Counsel in 1995, perhaps best known outside Scotland for the fact he was the senior prosecutor in the Lockerbie bombing trial, which ended in 2001 with the conviction of Abdelbaset al-Megrahi. He was then appointed to the Scottish Bench in 2003 and to the Inner House in 2013. And during his time as a judge, which ended in 2017, he was involved in 3 of the highest profile criminal trials in Scotland as a judge. He presided over the Tommy Sheridan trial in 2010. Tommy Sheridan being a former member of the Scottish Parliament who was prosecuted and convicted of perjury. Arlene Fraser case, which is a bodiless murder case where her husband, Nat Fraser, was convicted. The conviction was quashed. There was a retrial and he was convicted again. And David Gilroy, another bodiless trial, who again, his partner, disappeared, having gone to work in Edinburgh in the morning, was never found, and like Nat Fraser, David Gilroy was convicted also. So probably Lord Bracadale was unique as the only judge in Scotland ever to preside over 2 murder trials where the victim was never found. He retired in 2017 and was appointed in 2017 to lead a review into hate crime in Scotland, which had an impact on the hate crime legislation which was instituted a year or so ago. But the problem arose having conducted 122 days of evidence in the inquiry. It became known to parties with an interest in the inquiry that Lord Bracadale had met with the family, the Bayoh family, on 5 separate occasions. And surprisingly, not only were the other key participants not invited to attend, which would normally happen with a meeting with the judge behind closed doors, but they didn't even know about it until it seems all the meetings had taken place, and from what I can gather from the facts which are available in the public domain, there was correspondence which referred to meetings between the judge and the family, which the other interested parties became aware of and obviously had concerns about that. So there was a hearing in June 2025 when parties, including police representatives, but also significantly the Solicitor General, who is the second most senior prosecutor in Scotland, and together with others, they made an application that Lord Bracadale should, having met with the family, stand down from his position as chair. And that was really based on natural justice grounds, that the terms of reference are quite long, but they will undoubtedly involve determination of facts. So Lord Bracadale, where there's a conflict of evidence, would ultimately have to decide where he stood in relation to that conflict, who he believed, who he disbelieved. Clearly matters which could have consequences for the police officers involved in the arrest. And clearly they were motivated by a concern that if he had met the family in 5 separate occasions and had never met them, that they might be of something at a disadvantage when it came to considering the evidence at the end of the inquiry. So they raised an objection which was dealt with at a hearing in June of this year, Lord Bracadale took some time to think about it, but then in August he issued a judgment in which he said that he insisted that no fair-minded and informed observer would conclude that there was any real possibility that he was biased. And so he stuck it out, and much as I like Lord Bracadale, I did wonder whether in those circumstances you can really mark your own homework, and this was a point which had been raised in the debate, as I understand it, because it was suggested that, and there's case law which supports this, that it's no answer for the judge to say that he's impartial, because if there are grounds which would be sufficient to create in the mind of a reasonable man a doubt about the judge's impartiality, the inevitable result is that the judge is disqualified from taking any further part in the case. So that was the principle upon which the matter was argued and rejected, and therefore it appeared to be back on track with Lord Bracadale continuing. However, the Scottish Police Federation raised a judicial review, asking for a judicial review of Lord Bracadale's decision, essentially to continue to act as chair. There was a first hearing set in relation to that application for the 17th and the 18th of November of this year. However, I don't know what's happened in the meantime. I don't know whether Lord Bracadale has had sight of the petition for judicial review. I was trying to see if I could get hold of it. I didn't manage it, but it would be interesting. So I don't know whether he's read the petition and taken the view that it's likely that the petition would be granted, or whether he's just had second thoughts about the decision they issued in August. I don't know. All I know is that on 21st October, Tuesday of this week, he sent a resignation letter to Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes, in which he said, "It is now clear to me that many of the core participants have lost confidence in my conduct of the inquiry to such an extent that it cannot be retrieved. I am concerned the majority of core participants would have no confidence in the findings of any report prepared by me. In my view, the best interests of the inquiry would be served by the appointment of a new chair to whom all the existing evidence which is available on tape and transcript would be available." So what happens next? Well, they've already had 122 days. The cost of the inquiry to date is £26,249,080, so it's a lot of public money, a lot of time, and clearly Lord Bracadale's suggestion is that a new chair is appointed, and that new chair spends the initial period reviewing 122 days of recorded evidence, which clearly is going to delay the ultimate finding in the inquiry. But ultimately, as I say, he's not only was he a fantastic lawyer and a very able, courteous judge, he's a really, really nice person, and it's always bad when a nice guy has to take one. And sadly, this is one of these occasions. But having read the information which is available in the public domain, I don't entertain any doubt at all that ultimately he came to the right decision. And I don't share the suggestion which has been made on behalf of the family, or at least by a legal representative of the family, that the Scottish criminal justice system is institutionally racist. I don't accept that, and I hope that the Justice Minister and the Crown Office refute that allegation, because it's obviously a big serious allegation to make. I understand that feelings are probably running high at the moment, but I've been in the criminal justice system in Scotland now for 40 years, and I don't see any evidence of that at all. Okay. Thank you very much.